Imagine for a moment waking up with the striking awareness that the life you've been living might not truly belong to you, that the decisions you've made, the beliefs you hold dear, and even the desires that have propelled you forward may not have sprung from the deepest parts of your own being, but rather from layers of influence woven into you by your family, culture, education, and the quiet yet relentless expectations of society. How much of what you call you is genuinely your own creation, and how much is a carefully maintained facade designed to fit into the roles you've been given? How often do you feel as though you are playing a part in a drama you didn't write, acting out lines you never chose? This is the starting point for one of Carl Jung's most profound insights, the idea that life doesn't truly begin until you find yourself, not just superficially, but in a way that transforms your entire way of being. But what does it mean to find yourself? Is it a matter of simply knowing your preferences and habits, or is it something far more challenging, an inner journey that calls for courage, honesty, and a willingness to confront the parts of yourself you've ignored or denied? Jung believed that most people never embark on this journey at all. From the moment we arrive in the world, we are named, classified, and assigned roles. We learn what earns praise and what draws criticism. Slowly, without realizing it, we shape ourselves to fit the mold that brings approval and minimizes rejection. In this process, we hide aspects of ourselves, maybe our vulnerability, our creativity, our unconventional ideas that don't match the image others expect of us. This adaptation forms what Jung called the persona, the outward mask we wear to function in the social world. The persona is not inherently bad. It helps us navigate relationships and societal structures, but the danger comes when we forget that it's a mask at all. When we believe we are only what we present to the world, we lose touch with the deeper, truer layers beneath. And while the persona shows what we think the world will accept, another part of us, just as powerful, holds everything we think the world won't accept. Jung called this the shadow. The shadow is made up of all the traits, desires, fears, and even strengths we have repressed, hidden from ourselves because we were told they were unacceptable or dangerous. But the shadow doesn't vanish when we deny it. It continues to live in our unconscious, influencing our emotions, shaping our reactions, and even appearing in projections. Think of times when you've disliked someone instantly or felt disproportionately irritated by a particular behavior in another person. Often, those intense reactions point to qualities within your own shadow. Jung's revolutionary idea was that these hidden aspects are not enemies to be destroyed, but vital parts of our wholeness that need to be brought into the light and integrated. Integration means recognizing and accepting these parts of ourselves, not as flaws to be ashamed of, but as sources of insight, strength, and authenticity. Yet facing the shadow can be deeply uncomfortable, which is why so many people avoid it. It means looking closely at fears you've tried to ignore, questioning beliefs you've always held, and admitting to desires and emotions you may have judged harshly in yourself. But avoiding this work has a cost. The unresolved aspects of your psyche will still guide your life from the shadows, showing up as persistent anxiety, self-sabotage, or a constant feeling of being lost. Jung called the process of facing and integrating all these aspects individuation. This is the real path to becoming who you are meant to be, not by inventing a new self out of nothing, but by uncovering and embracing the totality of who you already are. Jung saw the unconscious not as a dark, chaotic realm to fear, but as a vast and intricate landscape containing everything we have yet to fully know about ourselves: forgotten memories, suppressed feelings, unexpressed creativity, and latent potential. Often, the unconscious calls to us through a subtle, persistent longing, a feeling that there's something more to life, a deeper version of ourselves waiting to emerge. This is not mere fantasy. It's the psyche nudging you toward growth. But it's a call we often drown out with distraction: work, entertainment, social media, anything to avoid sitting quietly with our thoughts. To begin the process of individuation, we must be willing to listen to that inner voice, to observe the patterns in our lives, to notice how old wounds continue to shape our choices, and to ask ourselves what unacknowledged parts might be hidden beneath our discomforts and fears. Consider the common fear of rejection. Many people bend over backwards to please others, avoiding conflict, silencing their own needs, and shaping themselves to avoid disapproval. On the surface, it may seem like this fear is about how others perceive us, but if we look deeper, we may find it's rooted in an early experience of being dismissed, misunderstood, or made to feel unworthy, a wound buried in the unconscious, still influencing our actions decades later. When we finally turn to face this fear, it loses its grip. We realize we can speak our truth and still be whole. We can risk disapproval without losing ourselves. Individuation is not about becoming perfect, it's about becoming complete. One of Jung's most important contributions was his exploration of archetypes, universal patterns and images stored in what he called the collective unconscious. These archetypes are shared by all humanity and appear in myths, stories, dreams, and symbols throughout history. They are psychological blueprints that influence how we think, feel, and behave. Among them is the hero, the part of us that seeks purpose, growth, and transformation. But the hero's journey always involves confronting the shadow, symbolized in myths as a monster, an adversary, or a great trial, before reaching true maturity. These archetypes also include the anima and animus, the inner feminine in men, embodying intuition, emotion, and creativity, and the inner masculine in women, representing logic, structure, and assertiveness. These are not about physical gender, but about balancing the full spectrum of human qualities. When we reject these energies, we become imbalanced. A man who denies his anima may fear emotional vulnerability. A woman who denies her animus may struggle to assert herself. But embracing both leads to inner strength and wholeness. Ultimately, finding yourself means embracing all parts of yourself, the light and the dark, the masculine and the feminine, the known and the unknown. And this brings us to a deeper truth Jung recognized. The greatest obstacle to self-discovery is the illusion of a fixed self. Most of us assume we are a single, unchanging identity defined by our past, our roles, and our labels. But in reality, the self is fluid, evolving, and far greater than the narrow image we hold of it. The identity you cling to now is only a fragment of a larger, more expansive consciousness that carries the wisdom of generations and the potential for continual transformation. The ego, the part of the mind that creates a sense of separation and defines boundaries, helps us navigate life, but it can also trap us in old patterns and keep us from realizing our vast potential. The path forward begins with loosening our grip on rigid labels, embracing the unknown as the place where growth happens, listening to the messages of our unconscious through dreams, intuitions, and symbols, and surrendering to the understanding that finding yourself is not a one-time achievement, but a lifelong unfolding. You have never truly been lost. The deeper self you seek has always been with you, quietly waiting for you to turn inward and remember. So let us venture deeper into this inner territory, because if the first step is recognizing that much of your life has been shaped by forces you didn't consciously choose, the second step is realizing just how far-reaching those forces truly are. From our earliest days, before we can even speak, we absorb subtle messages from the world around us. What emotions are welcome, what dreams are realistic, and which parts of ourselves are too much or not enough. These lessons become the invisible architecture of our identity, guiding our choices in ways we rarely question. And the challenge is that these early imprints do not fade with time. They become part of the unconscious blueprint from which we operate unless we deliberately bring them into awareness. Jung believed that to truly find ourselves, we must first dismantle the illusion that we are entirely the authors of our own lives. This is not meant to make us feel powerless, but to awaken us to the hidden programming we carry. Because only when we see the framework can we choose to rebuild it. If you've ever wondered why you keep repeating the same mistakes in relationships, why certain fears never seem to fade, or why you can't shake the sense that there is more to you than the life you're living, this is your psyche's way of saying that the answers lie beneath the surface. And here's where the journey becomes intensely personal, because no one else can do this inner excavation for you. You can read every book, attend every seminar, listen to every lecture on self-development, but unless you are willing to confront your own shadow, you will remain stuck in patterns that feel unshakable. The shadow is not simply a container for the bad parts of us. it also holds unclaimed strengths. Maybe you've suppressed your assertiveness because you were taught that speaking up was rude. Maybe you've hidden your creativity because somewhere along the way you believed you weren't talented enough. Over time, these buried traits don't disappear. They either turn inward, creating frustration and self-doubt, or they project outward, causing us to judge in others what we've denied in ourselves. When you find yourself triggered by someone's arrogance, could it be that you have unclaimed confidence buried within you? When you dislike someone's emotional intensity, could it be that you've locked away your own passion? This doesn't mean you must become like the people who irritate you, but it does mean that your reactions are opportunities for self-discovery. Jung was clear. The goal is not to eliminate the shadow, but to integrate it. Think of integration as the process of taking a disowned part of yourself by the hand, acknowledging its existence, and asking, "What do you have to teach me?" This act is transformative because once a part of you is acknowledged, it no longer needs to act out in unconscious ways. Imagine walking through life unafraid of your own emotions, no longer driven by fear of rejection, no longer bound to the old stories of who you are supposed to be. This is what individuation offers, the freedom to act from a place of authenticity rather than conditioning. But individuation is not a straight path. You may uncover truths about yourself that challenge your current relationships, your career, even your worldview. It's not unusual for people on this journey to feel a kind of inner upheaval as they start to live in alignment with their real values, rather than the values they inherited. This disruption is a sign that you are moving closer to your authentic self, not further from it. One of Jung's great insights was that the unconscious communicates in symbols, and the richest source of these symbols is our dreams. In dreams, the psyche expresses truths that the conscious mind cannot yet face directly. You might dream of being chaste, an image of some part of yourself you've been avoiding, or of finding a hidden room in your house, representing undiscovered potential within your psyche. Jung encouraged paying attention to recurring dream themes, writing them down, and exploring their possible meanings. But dreams are not the only pathway inward. Creative expression, painting, journaling, music, dance, can bypass the rational mind and give the unconscious a voice. Sometimes what emerges in these practices is surprising, even unsettling, but that is precisely why they are powerful. They allow you to bring shadow material into the light in a safe and transformative way. And while the shadow and the persona are deeply personal to each individual, Jung also identified patterns that are universal, the archetypes. These are not stereotypes but foundational psychic structures present in all humans. They shape our myths, our stories, and our inner lives. The hero archetype, for example, represents the part of you that seeks to grow and overcome challenges. But every hero's journey involves facing the shadow, symbolized in myths as dragons, enemies, or great trials. In your own life, these dragons might take the form of self-doubt, toxic relationships, or ingrained habits that hold you back. Defeating, or rather integrating the shadow is what allows the hero to return stronger and more whole. Then there is the anima and animus, the inner feminine within men and the inner masculine within women. These archetypes are about balance, not gender identity. The anima embodies emotional depth, intuition, and receptivity. The animus embodies structure, action, and reason. When one of these aspects is denied, imbalance results. A man who rejects his anima might become emotionally rigid. A woman who denies her animus might struggle to assert her will. But when both are embraced, they enrich and complete one another, leading to a greater sense of wholeness. And yet, even beyond the persona, the shadow, and the archetypes lies an even greater mystery, the nature of the self itself. Most of us believe that who we are is fixed, a single identity defined by our past, our roles, and our personal history. Jung and many philosophical and spiritual traditions challenge this, suggesting that the self is fluid, multidimensional, and in constant evolution. The identity you cling to now is only a small expression of a much larger consciousness that exists beyond the limits of your current awareness. This realization can be liberating, but also unsettling, because it means that much of what you think defines you, your name, your job, your history, is not the entirety of who you are. The ego, the part of your mind that gives you a sense of individual identity, is useful for navigating the world. But it is also the part that builds walls, creates separation, and resists change. While the ego insists this is me and that is not me, the deeper self knows that these boundaries are fluid. When we loosen the grip of the ego, we begin to see ourselves not as static beings, but as evolving processes, capable of endless transformation. To step beyond the illusion of a fixed self, Jung suggested embracing the unknown instead of fearing it. The unknown is where growth happens. It is the fertile ground in which new possibilities take root. This also means releasing attachment to rigid labels, whether they're about your personality, your achievements, or your past failures. You are not just the sum of those labels. You are something far more expansive. Listening to your unconscious, through dreams, through synchronicities, through gut feelings, is a way to connect with this deeper self. And perhaps most importantly, surrendering to the process means understanding that finding yourself is not an endpoint. It is a lifelong unfolding, a continual deepening of your relationship with who you are. Each time you face a new challenge, uncover a hidden fear, or integrate a previously rejected part of yourself, you move closer to wholeness. And here's the truth Jung would want you to remember. You have never actually been lost. The self you are seeking has been with you all along, patiently waiting for you to turn inward and recognize it. The journey is not about becoming someone else. It is about remembering who you have always been, beneath the layers of conditioning, fear, and illusion. This is the moment where the real adventure begins, not out there in the world, but within the vast and unexplored depths of your own being. If we continue along this path, we begin to see that the work of finding oneself is not about sudden revelation or a single moment of clarity, but rather about a sustained and patient process of peeling back the layers of our conditioned identity. Each layer we remove reveals another, and with each revelation we are invited to integrate what we find rather than discard it. Jung's approach to this was not one of erasing the past or trying to overwrite who we have been, but of embracing all that we have been, our mistakes, our triumphs, our wounds, and our hidden capacities, as vital parts of a greater whole. This is why he saw individuation as a lifelong journey. Every experience we have, every conflict we face, and every challenge that stirs our emotions is an opportunity to deepen that journey. The work begins with awareness, with the simple yet radical act of questioning whether the life we are living truly reflects who we are. For some, that realization comes in a moment of crisis, the collapse of a career, the end of a relationship, or a sudden loss that strips away the familiar structures of life. For others, it comes more subtly, a persistent feeling of restlessness, a quiet but unshakable sense that something essential is missing. No matter how it begins, the process that follows requires a willingness to look within and to listen to what we find there. The shadow, as Jung described it, is often the first great threshold on this path. Meeting it means coming face to face with qualities we have long disowned, some of which may be deeply uncomfortable to acknowledge. Perhaps we see in ourselves the envy we criticize in others, the arrogance we despise, or the vulnerability we fear. But within these disowned parts often lies the very key to our growth. The qualities we repress tend to hold energy, creativity, and strength that we have been too afraid to claim. Integration is the act of reclaiming this energy, and it transforms us, not into someone entirely new, but into a fuller, freer version of ourselves. One of the greatest tools for integration, Jung believed, is the cultivation of inner dialogue. This means engaging directly with the images, dreams, and intuitions that arise from the unconscious. Instead of dismissing a troubling dream or ignoring a recurring thought, we approach it with curiosity. What are you here to show me? What part of me do you represent? This attitude of curiosity softens the resistance we often feel toward the unknown, allowing us to explore aspects of ourselves without immediate judgment. Archetypes play a powerful role in this exploration. They appear not only in myths and stories, but in our own personal narratives. The wise mentor may appear in the form of a teacher, a book, or even a moment of unexpected clarity. The trickster might show up as the part of us that challenges our routines and disrupts our complacency, forcing us to adapt and grow. The hero's journey is perhaps the most universal of these patterns, an archetypal path that begins with a call to adventure, leads through trials and confrontations with the shadow, and ends with a return to life enriched by the treasures of self-knowledge. Yet the hero is not the only player in this inner drama. The anima and animus remind us of the need for balance between the receptive and the active, the intuitive and the rational. In a culture that often rewards one set of traits over the other, many of us grow up overdeveloping certain aspects of ourselves while neglecting or rejecting others. A man may learn to prize decisiveness and self-reliance while dismissing emotional openness as weakness. A woman may be encouraged to nurture and empathize, but discouraged from asserting her will or claiming authority. Jung's work challenges us to see these inner qualities not as opposites in conflict, but as complementary forces whose integration brings strength and harmony. When we embrace both, we become less limited by rigid identities and more capable of responding to life's demands in a flexible, authentic way. But perhaps the most challenging and liberating of Jung's insights is that even these archetypal patterns are not the ultimate truth of who we are. Beneath them lies the self in its totality, a reality that is fluid, boundless, and not confined by the labels, roles, or even personal narratives we construct. The ego, which serves the important function of giving us a sense of individual identity, resists this realization because it thrives on boundaries. I am this, I am not that. Yet the deeper self transcends such distinctions, containing within it all possibilities, all expressions of who we have been and who we might become. To glimpse this greater self is to recognize that the fears, limitations, and stories we cling to are not the whole truth. This recognition can be profoundly freeing, but it also demands that we let go of the comfort of certainty. The unknown becomes not an enemy, but an invitation. The process of stepping beyond the ego's limitations begins with loosening our attachment to fixed labels. You are not simply the sum of your past experiences, nor are you confined to the version of yourself that others see. Every moment contains the possibility of new choices, new expressions, new ways of being. When you release the need to define yourself rigidly, you create space for growth and transformation. Jung emphasized the importance of listening to the unconscious in this process. Our dreams, intuitions, and even the symbols that catch our attention in waking life can serve as messages from the deeper self. They may not always be clear at first, but over time patterns emerge, revealing insights into the forces that shape our thoughts and behaviors. This is why he encouraged practices that foster dialogue with the unconscious. Dream journaling, active imagination, creative expression, because they help bridge the gap between the conscious mind and the deeper layers of the psyche. Yet perhaps the most essential element of this journey is surrender. This is not the surrender of defeat, but the surrender of control. The willingness to allow the process of individuation to unfold in its own time and way. We cannot force self-discovery any more than we can force a seed to grow. We can only create the conditions for growth and remain attentive to the process. Surrender means accepting that there will be times of confusion, times when old patterns resurface, and times when the path forward is unclear. It is in these moments that trust becomes crucial. Trust in the process, trust in the deeper wisdom of the self, and trust that every step, even the ones that feel like setbacks, is part of a larger unfolding. This understanding reframes the challenges we face in life. Instead of seeing difficulties as obstacles to self-realization, we can begin to see them as necessary catalysts for growth. The betrayal that forces us to confront our boundaries, the loss that strips away our illusions, the failure that compels us to reassess our path, each of these can be a call from the deeper self, inviting us to shed what no longer serves us and step into greater authenticity. And so the journey to find yourself becomes less about reaching a destination and more about engaging fully with the unfolding of your life. Every interaction, every challenge, every joy and sorrow becomes part of the process. You begin to see that you are not moving toward wholeness as if it were somewhere outside of you. You are uncovering the wholeness that has been there all along, hidden beneath the layers of conditioning, fear, and self-doubt. In this light, life becomes a continuous act of remembering the parts of yourself you have forgotten, remembering the dreams you once silenced, remembering that beneath the mask of the persona and the shadows you've hidden away, There exists a self that is vast, capable, and already complete, and with each act of remembering, life begins not in some distant future, but right here, in this moment, as you step forward with greater clarity, courage, and authenticity than you have ever known. As we arrive at this final stage of the journey, it's important to recognize that what we've been exploring is not a set of abstract ideas to admire from a distance, but a living, breathing process that you can engage with every single day. Finding yourself, as Jung understood it, is not something you check off a list. It is not a sudden, permanent state where all your questions are answered and life becomes effortless. Instead, it is a lifelong unfolding, a dynamic and evolving relationship with your own depths. You will revisit old patterns at new stages of life. You will encounter fresh layers of your shadow when you step into new roles or face new challenges. You will discover hidden aspects of your potential when you are stretched by circumstances you didn't expect. And each of these moments is not a sign that you have failed, but that you are still alive to the process, still in the dance of becoming. One of the most profound shifts that happens when you truly commit to this path is that you stop looking for validation from the outside world to confirm who you are. Approval, success, reputation, these may still have a place, but they no longer serve as the foundation of your identity. You no longer have to prove yourself to be worthy. Instead, your worth becomes something you live from, not something you chase. This changes the way you interact with others. Relationships become less about playing roles and more about authentic connection. You can speak your truth without fearing that disagreement or rejection will erase your value. You can listen to others without feeling threatened by their differences. And you can recognize that every person you meet is on their own journey of self-discovery, carrying their own shadows and personas, just as you are. In practical terms, engaging with Jung's insights can mean adopting certain habits and practices that keep you connected to your inner world. This might involve setting aside time for daily reflection, just a few minutes to check in with yourself, notice what you're feeling, and ask what those feelings might be pointing toward. It might mean keeping a dream journal, not as a way to decode some rigid universal meaning, but as a way to track the symbols, themes, and patterns that arise from your unconscious over time. It could mean exploring creative expression, not for the sake of performance or perfection, but as a channel for the images and emotions that your rational mind cannot easily articulate. Another key practice is learning to sit with discomfort. In our fast-paced, distraction-heavy culture, we're conditioned to escape discomfort the moment it appears. But discomfort is often the signal that you've touched on something important, some part of yourself that's asking to be acknowledged. When you resist the urge to immediately distract yourself and instead turn toward that discomfort with curiosity, you create the possibility for integration and healing. Jung often spoke about synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that seem to connect our inner and outer worlds. Paying attention to these moments can be another way of staying in dialogue with your unconscious. They might be small. A phrase you've been thinking about suddenly appears in a book you randomly open, or a chance encounter offers exactly the perspective you've been needing. Whether or not you view these as mystical, they can be seen as reminders to remain open and attentive, to recognize that your psyche is in constant communication with the life around you. On the deepest level, the process of individuation leads to a shift in how you perceive reality itself. When you see that your identity is not fixed, that you are more than your persona, more than your shadow, more than any single archetype, you begin to experience yourself as part of something larger. This doesn't erase your individuality. Rather, it situates your individuality within a greater whole. You see that your life, with all its unique details, is also an expression of patterns and truths that are universal. You begin to sense that the self Jung spoke of is not just your personal self, but a doorway into the shared human experience, and even beyond that, into the vast, interconnected field of existence itself. This awareness is both humbling and empowering. Humbling, because it shows you that you are not the isolated center of the universe your ego might imagine. Empowering, because it reveals that you have access to wisdom, strength, and creativity that come not just from your own personal history, but from the depths of the collective unconscious, the living memory of humanity. From this place, the goal is no longer to build a rigid, unchanging identity, but to live as a fluid, evolving being, capable of growth, adaptation, and deep connection. You become less concerned with controlling every outcome and more focused on responding authentically to whatever arises. Life's uncertainties no longer feel like threats to your existence. They become invitations to explore new aspects of yourself and the world. There is a paradox at the heart of this journey. You are already whole, yet you are also in the process of becoming whole. You have never truly been incomplete. Yet the act of uncovering and integrating all parts of yourself brings a richness and depth to life that can only be experienced through the process of discovery. Jung's work reminds us that wholeness is not about perfection. It's about inclusivity. It's about making room for every part of yourself, even the ones you have judged, feared, or forgotten. In the end, finding yourself is not about rejecting the life you've lived so far. It's about taking everything you've experienced, the conditioning, the roles, the shadow, the archetypes, and weaving them into a coherent, authentic whole. It's about reclaiming your agency, your voice, and your presence so that you can engage with life from a place of integrity. And when you do this, something remarkable happens. The world around you begins to shift. Your relationships become deeper and more genuine. Your work, whatever it is, feels more aligned with your values. You become less reactive, more grounded, and more open to the mystery of life. And perhaps most importantly, you stop waiting for some future moment when you will finally arrive and instead begin to live fully in the present, knowing that the journey itself is the point. If there's one message to take from all of this, it's that the self you've been seeking has never been absent. It has been here all along, quietly waiting beneath the noise of expectations, fears, and distractions. Every step you take toward awareness, integration, and authenticity is a step toward remembering what has always been true. So the question is not whether you will find yourself someday, but whether you will choose, in this moment, to turn toward that truth and live from it. You have within you the capacity to shed the masks that no longer serve you, to embrace the shadows that hold your hidden strengths, to balance the energies that make you whole, and to step beyond the narrow definitions of who you think you are. This is not a journey for the faint of heart. It requires honesty, courage, and a willingness to face the unknown. But it is also the most rewarding journey you can take, because at its end, if there can be said to be an end, you discover that you have not only found yourself, but also found a deeper connection to the life that surrounds you. And so, as you move forward, remember that every moment of self-awareness, every act of courage in facing your own truth, and every step you take toward integration is life itself unfolding through you. The path is not outside you, it is you, and in walking it you embody the very essence of Jung's insight. Life does not truly begin until you find yourself, and now you know the way.